AITA for refusing to fix my brother's mess 3 years after he got my ex-fiancée pregnant? 3 years ago, I was engaged to a woman. Let us call her Hannah. At the time, I genuinely believed she was the love of my life. Hannah and I had been together for almost 5 years, and our relationship seemed solid. We were both lawyers working in a busy firm in the suburbs outside Charlotte, North Carolina. This meant we led demanding and fast-paced lives, but we always made sure to make time for each other. The year I proposed to her was supposed to be the best of our lives. But that same year, something unexpected happened. She lost her job. She was let go after a serious breach of company policy. I will not go into details because it is personal, but what I can say is that the firm handled her dismissal in a rather harsh way. If you know a high achiever and a workaholic, you might understand how deeply such a loss can affect someone. Work was not just a job for Hannah. It was a part of her identity, her pride, and her purpose. Losing it so abruptly completely destabilized her. Hannah immediately threw herself into looking for a new position, applying to many firms and companies. Unfortunately, her field was highly specialized and opportunities were scarce, especially after the circumstances of her dismissal. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and she still had not found work. Throughout this time, I tried to be as present and understanding as possible. I assured her that she should not worry about money. After all, we were engaged and I considered it my duty to take care of her during this difficult period. Knowing Hannah's tendency to overthink and stress out, I encouraged her to relax and not let the situation consume her. To my surprise, she took my advice, or at least she tried. With all this free time, she decided to pursue a dream she had always had, learning pottery. She enrolled in a ceramics workshop at the local community arts center and started spending her free hours there. That was also the workshop my brother Brandon attended. Let me tell you a bit about Brandon. He is the complete opposite of me. I was the serious brother, a bit of a nerd, focused on my studies and my career, while Brandon was the typical troublemaker. He spent his school days acting out and having fun, and had built a reputation as a careless, smooth talker. He is the kind of guy who never stayed with a girl for long and took nothing seriously. Hannah had met Brandon early in our relationship and knew exactly what kind of person he was. So when she started going to the same workshop as him, I thought it was just a coincidence. But looking back, that is when things started to change. In just a few weeks, they became surprisingly close. At first, I did not worry too much about it. Brandon offered to give her a ride to or from the workshop, which seemed nice, although unusual. Hannah would come home and enthusiastically tell me what they had done in class or show me the pieces they had worked on. Then their outings went beyond pottery. They started spending time together on weekends, visiting art museums, or trying out new restaurants. These were activities Hannah and I usually did together, but now she was doing them with Brandon instead. Gradually, I could no longer ignore the changes in Hannah's behavior. She was spending a lot more time with Brandon, and it was affecting our relationship. She even started canceling our date nights to be with him. I am not the type to let things fester in silence. So one evening, I confronted her directly. I asked her bluntly if something was going on between her and Brandon. Hannah was surprised by my question, almost shocked. She categorically denied any inappropriate relationship and insisted that their bond was purely platonic. She explained that spending time with him was lighthearted and fun, and that she saw him somewhat like a little brother. She seemed genuinely hurt that I could imagine anything else. And for a moment, I felt guilty for suspecting her. But deep down, those words did not completely soothe my doubts. Everything blew up just 2 months before our wedding. I was working extremely hard at that time, juggling an intense workload to make sure everything was financially ready. Since Hannah had lost her job, I was solely covering all the expenses related to our house and our wedding. She still had not found work, and even though she used some of her savings for personal needs or emergencies, I bore the main weight of everything. Between the stress, the payments, and the wedding planning, my hours at the office had grown longer and I was around less and less. In hindsight, maybe that gave them the opportunity to get so close. One evening, I came home early from a business trip. I was eager to surprise Hannah and spend time with her. Pulling into the driveway, I immediately noticed my brother's car parked out front. Normally, I would not have found this strange. Brandon used to drop by unannounced, but this time was different. It was already past 9 in the evening, and seeing his car there raised my suspicions. Unlocking the door and quietly stepping inside, I immediately heard muffled laughter coming from inside the house. The living room was empty, but the television was on, casting shadows across the room. My eyes were immediately drawn to the beer cans scattered on the floor, then to Hannah's clothes and underwear tossed haphazardly among them. My stomach tied in knots. I knew exactly what I was about to discover. A part of me wanted to turn around, but the other part, the one that needed irrefutable proof, pushed me forward. I walked slowly, my heart pounding, toward the bedroom. I reached the doorway and stopped. There they were, Hannah and Brandon, in an intimate encounter. They were so absorbed in each other that they did not even notice me. Normally, I am a calm and composed person, but this was a betrayal on an unimaginable scale. My fiancée, the woman I was supposed to marry in 2 months, was with my own brother. Without saying a word, I walked into the room. In the heat of the moment, a physical confrontation occurred in which I struck Brandon, resulting in him sustaining injuries, including a bloody nose and bruises. He was in pain and clearly terrified. I did not even look at Hannah at first. Brandon started stammering apologies, but his words meant nothing to me at that moment. Once he was on the floor, I turned my attention to Hannah. She was sitting on the bed, shaking, in tears. I looked her dead in the eye and told her in a cold, controlled voice that she had 10 minutes to get out of my house. Otherwise, I told her I would have no choice but to involve the authorities. She started pleading with me, apologizing over and over. She said she could explain everything and that she wanted to fix things, but I wanted neither her apologies nor her excuses. I glanced at my watch and told her in a flat tone that she had 9 minutes left. The tone of my voice and the look in my eyes must have made her realize I was not joking, because she scrambled out of bed and started getting dressed, trembling. Tears streamed down her face as she grabbed a suitcase from the closet and began shoving whatever she could into it. Once she was done, dragging her half-full suitcase down the stairs, she turned to me one last time. In a broken voice, she begged me to listen to her, claiming she loved me and deserved a chance to explain herself. Without a word, I took her hand, pulled the engagement ring off her finger, and firmly guided her toward the door. She resisted, begging me to reconsider, but I was done. I opened the door, and she stepped out into the night. She stood on the porch, crying and screaming for me to forgive her. I did not even look back as I closed the door behind her. Brandon's face was still bruised and bloody after the altercation. Even though I was still seething with rage, I did not want to be responsible for anything worse. I called my parents and told them everything. My dad was furious with Brandon, and my mom was in shock, but they told me they were coming over right away. When they arrived, my mom, who is a nurse, tended to Brandon's injuries. She cleaned and bandaged his wounds, which fortunately for him were mostly superficial. Meanwhile, my dad took me into the backyard, away from Brandon. He could see that my hands were still shaking with anger and that I could barely stand emotionally. A little later, Brandon came out with my mom. His face was bruised, his nose bandaged, and his shirt still stained with blood. He apologized for betraying me, claiming he never wanted things to happen this way. Then he dropped the bomb. He told me he was in love with Hannah. I finally turned to him, glaring with pure hatred. He went on, explaining that he believed Hannah felt the same way about him. He claimed it was the first time they had been together like that, as if that made it any more acceptable. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me their messages. Exchanges filled with suggestive texts, secrets, and Hannah venting about how unhappy she was in our relationship. According to Brandon, she was the one who had invited him over that night, thinking I would still be out of town. Reading those messages brought all the rage flooding back. Brandon kept talking, saying how sorry he was, but that he had never felt something so strong for anyone before. He said he could not help himself and begged me to forgive him. Those words were like daggers twisted into an open wound. My dad, who had stayed silent until then, finally exploded. He harshly reprimanded Brandon, telling him how deeply he had betrayed me and that he should be ashamed. But my mom's reaction was different. Brandon had always been her favorite, and I could tell she was struggling to process the situation. She started telling me that no matter what I decided to do about Hannah, I had to forgive my brother. She said he seemed truly remorseful, as if that lessened the magnitude of his betrayal. I could not believe my ears. I cut her off and told my parents I did not want lectures or advice. All I wanted was for them to take Brandon and leave. I could not stand the sight of him anymore. My dad nodded, understanding I needed space, and helped Brandon into the car. My mom hesitated, clearly wanting to stay and smooth things over, but she eventually followed them. In the weeks that followed, I struggled with the emotional fallout of Hannah's betrayal. She texted me constantly, begging for forgiveness and trying to explain herself, but her excuses always went in circles, more or less repeating what Brandon had already told me. She claimed they never meant to hurt me. I ignored her throughout all those weeks. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Brandon. He announced that he and Hannah had just found out she was pregnant and that the baby was his. He told me that since she was carrying his child, he wanted to marry her and he wanted my blessing. I could not believe his nerve after everything he had done to me, and my mom's reaction only made things worse. She was already trying to play mediator between Brandon and me, but now she seemed to view Hannah's pregnancy as some sort of blessing. She told me it was part of a larger plan for Hannah to get pregnant and that maybe Brandon and Hannah were destined to be together from the start. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. It was as if she was trying to justify the unjustifiable, to excuse what they had done just because it perfectly fit her new fantasy of becoming a grandmother. I told my mom clearly that I saw exactly what she was doing, and that if she chose to side with Brandon and Hannah, then our relationship was over. And I was not joking. My brother's betrayal was already hard enough to swallow, but seeing my own mother take their side was something I could not accept. My dad tried to stay neutral. Maybe he thought it would ease the tension. Anyway, my mom offered Hannah financial support, assuring her that she and the baby would be well taken care of. But of course, there was a condition. My mom demanded that Hannah and Brandon get married. After all, it was what Brandon wanted too. Mom was relentless in her drive to make this marriage happen, refusing even to entertain the thought that her grandchild might be born outside of marriage. When I found out that Brandon and Hannah were indeed getting married and had started sending invitations to our family, I was overcome with anger and humiliation. Without escalating the conflict any further, I simply kept my word and cut ties with my mother and brother. However, my mom never gives up easily. For weeks after our fallout, she called me endlessly, left voicemails, and even showed up at my house uninvited, trying to guilt-trip me into coming back. It was suffocating. That is when I knew the only way to escape this situation was to leave town. 3 years have passed since I rebuilt my life in another city, cutting all contact with almost my entire family, except for my dad. He respected my decision to step away and understood why I needed distance, even if it made him sad that I no longer came to visit him. Over 3 years, I slowly rebuilt my life. I did not share my new number with anyone but my dad. I made new friends and found some sense of normalcy while working hard to leave the past behind. So imagine my shock when I saw Hannah on my doorstep yesterday, ringing my doorbell in my new home in Denver. When I opened the door, I barely recognized her. Hannah looked nothing like the woman I had once loved. Her clothes were worn out, her face pale and gaunt, her hair dull and unkempt. She stood there, holding the hand of a little girl who could not have been more than 2 or 3 years old. The child had Brandon's distinct features, an undeniable resemblance. He was clearly her father. For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. My mind was racing with questions. Why was she here? How had she found me? What did she want? The years spent trying to forget her and heal from the pain she had caused me seemed to crumble all at once. Finally, I broke the silence. Hannah, what are you doing here? Her eyes filled with tears and her voice trembled as she asked if she could come in, saying she had something important to tell me. My first instinct was to refuse and send them away. But looking at the little girl beside her, staring at me with big, innocent eyes, I did not have the heart to be harsh in front of her. So I stepped aside and let them in. I had them sit on the couch and offered them some water. Once seated, I sat across from them and asked what she was doing there. I already knew she could not have found me on her own. I had not given my address to anyone but my dad, and I trusted him to keep it a secret, except in case of an emergency. Instead of answering right away, Hannah pulled an envelope from her bag. She handed it to me without a word. I opened it and immediately recognized my mom's handwriting. My stomach dropped as I read the contents of the letter. My mom bluntly wrote that it was up to me to clean up the mess Brandon had made. She explained that Hannah and Sophie were in deep trouble, that Brandon had abandoned them, and that as Brandon's brother and Sophie's uncle, I had to take care of them now. I looked up at Hannah, both confused and furious. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the letter. That is when Hannah broke down and started pouring everything out. According to her, Brandon had been unfaithful throughout their marriage right from the start. Even after their daughter Sophie was born, my brother kept having affairs over and over. Hannah, for her part, had tried to save their marriage, hoping it would get better over time, if only for Sophie. But 3 months earlier, Brandon had simply packed his bags and left without any explanation or warning. He just vanished. Since then, Hannah had been on her own. She had no job, no savings, and no home. She and Brandon had been renting an apartment, and without him, she could no longer pay the rent. My mom, feeling somewhat responsible because of Sophie, had given her a little money to get by. But now that Brandon seemed permanently out of the picture, my mom no longer wanted to bear this responsibility alone. So Hannah explained that my mom now expected me to take charge of Hannah and Sophie, since she had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I was utterly disgusted by what she was asking and by the absurdity of this expectation from both my mom and Hannah. My mom, who had sided with Brandon during the initial betrayal, was now trying to pass off the consequences of his actions onto me. It was sickening but not surprising. My mom's blind favoritism toward Brandon had always prevented her from seeing the damage he caused. I immediately told Hannah, bluntly and in front of the child, that she had no right to expect anything from me. This was not my child. She was no longer my fiancée, and this situation was in no way my responsibility. Even though I felt a bit of pity hearing that Brandon had abandoned her, she should have seen it coming. After all, Brandon was neither reliable nor trustworthy. Regardless, I refused to let myself be manipulated by guilt. So I asked Hannah to leave. She started crying, saying she had nowhere to go, not a dime to her name, and that what little she had left she used to pay for gas to get to me. Ultimately, I handed her a few $100s before asking her to leave. Ever since, even though I know I did the right thing, I cannot help but feel a certain amount of guilt. I feel bad for that poor kid. So what do you think? Update 1. Alright, I would like to clarify a few things. My mother's behavior in this situation completely baffles me. The fact that she is trying to guilt trip me into helping Hannah and her child after everything that happened is incredibly selfish. I understand she might feel obligated because of her granddaughter, but she should not expect me to pick up the pieces of the mess left by her son, especially after totally disregarding my feelings and siding with Brandon during that betrayal. Her request is completely out of line. I agree with some of you. My dad betrayed me too. Instead of supporting me after the infidelity, he took a neutral stance. Even if he scolded my brother at one point, he never truly took my side. By not standing up to my mother's manipulative behavior, he also contributed to this betrayal. I plan to speak to him very soon. Hannah may have been abandoned by Brandon, but that does not automatically mean I have to take care of her. She made her choices, and while I feel some compassion for her situation, I owe her nothing. Showing up at my house with nothing but a sob story and a kid only highlights her desperation. What I did, asking her to leave while giving her some cash, was not cruelty, it was setting boundaries. I did not reject her out of spite. I simply made it clear that it is not my job to clean up Brandon's mess. I am not obligated to take care of her just because she hit a rough patch. No, this child is definitely not mine. Hannah and I had been broken up for several weeks when she got pregnant, and we had not been intimate for quite a while before that. The timeline is clear. There is absolutely no possibility that I am the father. Plus, Sophie has all of Brandon's features. His face, his eyes, his smile. It is like looking at a miniature version of Brandon. I have zero doubt that Brandon is her father. I do not need to take a paternity test. The resemblance is undeniable. This is his kid, and I do not want to be dragged into more drama. No, I will not adopt my niece. I cannot even believe some people would suggest that. Regardless of Hannah's financial or emotional situation, she is the mother and it is her responsibility. I do not understand why she never worked after the wedding, nor why she did not save any money. Brandon is the father. So even if they split up, it is up to the two of them to take responsibility for their child. Brandon has no choice but to pay child support. Update 2. I talked to my parents about all this. I already knew it was my dad who had given my address to Hannah, but I wanted to hear it from him. I called him and asked him point blank why he agreed to give her my address when I had specifically asked him not to, and what exactly he expected of me regarding Hannah and her child after all these years. My dad was silent for a moment, visibly uncomfortable. Then he let out a deep sigh and apologized. "I am sorry, son. I really am," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We tried everything to help Hannah, but with Brandon gone for so long, there was not much we could do. Your mom begged me to give her your address. She figured that maybe if you saw her again after all this time, you might want to help her out a bit since she has nowhere to go." I felt the anger rising inside me, and I asked him why he thought I would help a woman like her. "She betrayed me with Brandon. She hurt me, and now you want me to help her?" My dad told me he understood why I was angry. He explained that neither he nor my mom wanted things to turn out this way, but that Hannah and Sophie were also part of the family. They believed I was their only hope. He apologized again, but I was no longer listening. I told him that he and I were done. I had thought he was different from my mom, but in the end, they are all the same. Did he really think I was going to forget the past, welcome Hannah and my brother's kid into my life, and start taking care of them? Unbelievable. My parents truly did not care about me. I told my dad, firmly and without hesitation, to delete my number and forget about me. Since he knew my address, I warned him. If he or my mom ever set foot on my property again, I would call the police. My dad tried to apologize some more, begging me to listen, but I was no longer interested. "Do not ever call me again," I said, cutting him off. "You made your choices, and now I am making mine." Without waiting for his reply, I hung up and blocked his number. What my dad did is unforgivable, and there is no going back. Update 3. Almost a month has passed since my last update. I finally managed to track down Brandon with the help of a buddy. It turns out Hannah was telling the truth. Brandon is currently living with his new girlfriend a few towns over from Charlotte, acting like he has no responsibilities, like he does not have a family. I could not believe this was the same guy who 3 years ago looked me dead in the eye to tell me he loved Hannah, the same guy who ruined my life. And now, after all that, he is living with someone else as if he never abandoned his wife and child. It is sickening and absolutely infuriating. How can anyone be so selfish and so cold? The fact that he takes this so lightly, as if abandoning his own flesh and blood were just a minor inconvenience, disgusts me. Once I found out where he was, I passed his address along to Hannah. I did not want to get any more involved in this mess, but I also did not want her to feel completely powerless. Comment: I really appreciate you sticking around for this story. It hit me hard and made me think deeply about self-respect. Knowing when to walk away from hurtful situations is a form of strength, and setting clear boundaries has become one of the most valuable lessons in my own life. Healing isn't easy, but giving yourself space to rebuild is so important. We each have a responsibility to protect our own peace. It's okay to be kind without taking on burdens that aren't yours. Letting go of drama can bring a surprising amount of freedom. I hope this encourages you to examine the boundaries in your relationships. You deserve a life filled with respect and real peace. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.